Jonathan never saw the energy net coming. One moment he was charting a course through unclaimed space, the next, he was staring at the distorted image of a dozen alien warships through his console. His small scout ship stood no chance. He barely had time to send a distress signal before they ripped through his hull and boarded. The aliens were reptilian, with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like chips of obsidian. They spoke in guttural hisses and clicks, their translator devices spitting out a crude approximation of galactic standard. Jonathan was dragged through the shattered remains of his ship, his captors shoving him roughly toward an awaiting transport. He caught a glimpse of the prison vessel before they threw him inside, a monstrous, spiked monstrosity that seemed to devour the light around it. He was shoved into a cramped cell, the door slamming shut with a final hiss that echoed the cold indifference of his captors. Jonathan was alone, a prisoner of an empire that knew no mercy. He slammed his fist against the wall, the metal cold and unforgiving against his skin. Despair threatened to consume him, but Jonathan quickly shoved it aside. Despair was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had to find a way out. He had to survive. The prison was a nightmare of sterile white corridors and blindingly bright lights. The air was heavy with the stench of disinfectant and fear. The other prisoners were a menagerie of species, each bearing the scars of the Empire's cruelty. They huddled in their cells, their eyes hollowed out by despair. Jonathan quickly learned the brutal routine of the prison. Days bled into weeks, each one an agonizing eternity. The guards, faceless in their black armor, watched their every move. Escape seemed impossible. The prison was a fortress, a floating monument to the Empire's absolute power. But Jonathan refused to give in to despair. He observed, he learned. He studied the prison's routines, the guards' shift changes, the subtle flaws in the seemingly impenetrable security system. He made contact with other prisoners, whispering to them in the darkness, planting seeds of hope in the barren soil of their despair. He knew he couldn't escape through brute force. The Empire's technology was too advanced, their defenses too formidable. His only weapon was his mind. He had to find a way to turn the prison's own systems against it, to use their arrogance, their belief in their own invincibility against them. Jonathan's plan was audacious, bordering on insane. He wasn't content with simply escaping. He wanted to take control of the entire prison. It was a long shot, a gamble against impossible odds. But Jonathan was a gambler, and the stakes had never been higher. He began subtly manipulating the prison's systems. He exploited a flaw in the automated food dispensers. He used the excess food to barter with other prisoners. He learned the alien languages, earning their respect. He identified the natural leaders among the prisoners. He shared his plan with them, carefully, selectively. He knew he couldn't afford any mistakes. One wrong move could bring his entire plan crashing down. He needed to create chaos, to sow discord among his captors. He needed to turn the prisoners into a united force. It was a daunting task, but Jonathan had never been one to shy away from a challenge. He had faced impossible odds before. He would do so again. Jonathan became a phantom, moving through the prison's shadows, leaving a trail of disruptions in his wake. He orchestrated a series of seemingly unrelated incidents, a power outage here, a malfunctioning security camera there. Each incident, minor in itself, chipped away at the illusion of order, sowing doubt and uncertainty among the guards. He used his knowledge of the prison's systems to create diversions, drawing the guards away from key areas. He learned how to manipulate the prison's communication network, spreading rumors and disinformation among the guards, turning them against each other. He was a puppet master, pulling at the strings, orchestrating a symphony of chaos. The prisoners, initially wary, began to take notice. The whispers of the ghost, as they called him, spread through the cell blocks. Hope, long dormant, flickered back to life in their eyes. They saw that the Empire was not invincible, that their captors could be challenged. The guards, once so confident, so assured of their dominance, became increasingly agitated. The prison, once a model of order and efficiency, was slowly descending into chaos. They doubled the patrols, tightened security, but the incidents continued. They were fighting an invisible enemy, an enemy who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The tension in the prison was a living thing, crackling in the air like static electricity. Jonathan could feel it, taste it. He knew the time was close. He had spent months laying the groundwork, nurturing the seeds of rebellion. Now it was time for those seeds to blossom. He gathered his lieutenants, the leaders he had carefully cultivated from the ranks of the prisoners. They met in the dead of night, huddled in the shadows of a rarely used storage room. He outlined his plan, his voice low and urgent. The plan was daring, relying on perfect timing and a healthy dose of luck. They would use the upcoming prisoner transfer as a cover, a moment of maximum confusion to launch their attack. Jonathan looked at the faces of his lieutenants, a motley crew of hardened criminals, political prisoners and rebels fighting for lost causes. They came from different worlds, spoke different languages, but they were united by a single purpose: to break free from the Empire's grasp. He saw the fear in their eyes, but also the determination, the burning desire for freedom. He knew that many of them would not survive the coming fight, but there was no hesitation, no doubt in their resolve. They were ready. The day of the prisoner transfer dawned cold and oppressive. Beneath the surface, anticipation ran through the prison. Jonathan felt it, a hum vibrating in the walls. Transfer ships arrived with overwhelming firepower. Armed guards swarmed the docking bay. As prisoners were herded, Jonathan made his move. An explosive charge plunged the facility into darkness. A riot erupted, drawing guards away. Jonathan and his lieutenants took control, sowing confusion. They were so close to freedom. The tide of the battle shifted back and forth. The prisoners, fueled by desperation and the taste of freedom, fought with a ferocity that surprised even Jonathan. They overwhelmed the guards with sheer numbers, using whatever weapons they could salvage from the chaos: makeshift clubs, shards of metal, even bare fists. The control center, the nerve center of the prison, became the focal point of the battle. Jonathan and his lieutenants fought their way through the corridors, leaving a trail of fallen guards in their wake. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of blood, the floor slick with gore. They finally reached the control center, only to find it heavily guarded by elite troops, their black armor gleaming under the emergency lights. A fierce firefight erupted, the air filled with the whine of energy weapons and the roar of alien battle cries. Jonathan, his heart pounding in his chest, fought with a cold fury, knowing that the fate of the entire prison rested on his shoulders. One by one, his lieutenants fell, cut down by enemy fire. But for every fallen comrade, 2 more prisoners stepped up to take their place. The guards, outnumbered and outmatched, began to give ground. Jonathan, his vision blurry with sweat and blood, pressed the attack, pushing them back, inch by inch, until they were finally driven from the control center. With the control center secured, Jonathan turned his attention to the remaining guards. He used the prison's intercom system, his voice amplified throughout the facility, calling for their surrender. He offered them a choice: lay down their arms and be treated as prisoners of war, or face the consequences. Most of the guards, demoralized and leaderless, chose to surrender. The few who resisted were quickly overwhelmed. The fighting slowly subsided, replaced by an eerie silence. The air, still thick with smoke and the coppery tang of blood, crackled with the raw energy of victory. Jonathan stood in the heart of the control center, surrounded by his exhausted but triumphant comrades. The prison, once a symbol of the Empire's tyranny, was now theirs. He looked out at the faces of the prisoners, their eyes shining with a mixture of awe, relief, and disbelief. He knew their ordeal was far from over. The Empire would undoubtedly retaliate, sending a fleet of warships to reclaim their lost asset and punish those who dared to defy them. But for this one brief moment, they were free. They had stared into the abyss of despair and emerged victorious. Jonathan, now the de facto leader of the prison, knew he had to act quickly. The Empire's reprisal would be swift and merciless. He set his people to work, repairing the damaged systems, fortifying the prison's defenses, preparing for the inevitable counterattack. He sent out a distress signal, a beacon of hope into the void, hoping against hope that someone, somewhere, was listening. He knew the odds were stacked against them. The Empire was vast, its resources almost limitless. But they had one advantage, the element of surprise. The Empire, arrogant and complacent, would underestimate them. They would see them as nothing more than a nuisance, a minor inconvenience to be swiftly crushed. They would learn, Jonathan vowed, that the human spirit, once ignited, could not be so easily extinguished. They had taken the first step, a small step, but a significant one. They had shown the galaxy that the Empire was not invincible, that even the most oppressed could rise up and claim their freedom. The stars were vast, the galaxy a canvas of infinite possibilities. The fight for freedom had just begun, and Jonathan, standing on the bridge of a hijacked prison ship, was ready to lead the charge. The stars awaited,